Gracias for pressing play and welcome to SmartChickens, a working together, smarter, diversity meets innovation and growth podcast. In today's episode, we have a very special guest, Jeff Perkins. He is currently the CMO of ParkMobile IO and recent author of a marketing book titled How to Not Suck at Marketing. He started his 20-plus career grinding it out in the New York City advertising industry. At Saatchi & Saatchi, he worked on brands including Tide, HBO, Pepsi, Michelin, Office Depot, Fruit Roll-Ups, Rockport, Volvo, and Hasbro, just to name a few. He launched Howard Stern on Sirius Satellite Radio in 2005. As always, this podcast is brought to you by our good friends at digitechie.com, a conversational marketing, demand gen, and revenue accelerator consultancy, helping B2B companies achieve 6 to 7 figures in pipeline consistently. And gypsyforever.com, uniquely handmade wellness products to help you connect your mind, body, and soul to achieve a better balanced you. Jeff Perkins, CMO of ParkMobile. Welcome to the SmartChickens podcast. It's a podcast dedicated to how diversity and innovation drives growth in organizations. And we know that you've got a diverse background within your career, which I'd like to delve into a little bit and unpack, but also to talk about the innovations that you put forth with your sales team and the rest of the ParkMobile team to make sure that 2020 and now coming into 21 is successful as it was in the last year in a very difficult year for many companies.
Really happy to be here with you. I think you, if nothing else, I can say now I've never been on a podcast that's named after chickens, so that's kind of cool. so super excited to be on.
Appreciate it. So yeah, tell us a little bit about your origin story on how you kind of navigated through your earlier parts of your career to get to a CMO level, because I think for a lot of folks that want to achieve that next step into the CMO realm, it's interesting to kind of know what your path was, so maybe they can mirror it or might resonate with someone listening.
Sure. Well, I usually tell people don't do what I did because my path is, I think, very unconventional in many ways. And I always look at these people who have these career journeys where they knew what they wanted to do at a very young age, they pursued it, and now they're super successful. I'm the total opposite of that, where I had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up. And so I just kind of started falling into things. So I'll go way back into high school. I was in the student government, and I really liked leadership, and that took me into politics. So I studied political science in college at American University in Washington, D.C. I was a White House intern. I had a really good experience during my 4 years there, but I realized at the end, I don't want to work in politics. That really wasn't something. I came out of school with this burning desire to go work on a campaign or work in a bureaucracy or work in Congress. I said, I want to do something different. But the problem was I had no skills at that point. I had studied political science for 4 years. I didn't know what I wanted to do. All I had was this portfolio of like political ad campaigns that I had done for our class. And so I started, talking to people and showing them some of that stuff. And they said, oh, this is pretty good. You should be in advertising. And so through networking, I was able to get some connections in some New York ad agencies. And I was really lucky to land at an agency called Saatchi & Saatchi, which is a very kind of a famous ad agency that
absolutely
came up in really the 70s and 80s out of Europe and then in the United States. And I worked on Procter & Gamble. They were one of my first clients. And that's really where I started to develop an interest and love for the marketing function. I was doing advertising campaigns for Tide laundry detergent and Cascade dishwashing detergent while living in a 500 square foot apartment without a washer and dryer or a dishwasher. So because I wasn't someone who actually did laundry or dishes, I actually had to really study to understand the target market. And fortunately, Procter & Gamble has tons of research, and they're really excellent in understanding the consumer and the target audience. And that was kind of my first taste of getting into the field. And I spent about 5 years working at Saatchi & Saatchi on the Procter & Gamble brands. And after a while, I started to get frustrated that I was only doing the advertising because I had a lot of ideas for the product and I had a lot of ideas for the business overall. And everyone kind of put me in this advertising box, and they didn't want to hear my ideas about other parts of the business. And so that was frustrating. So I said, well, maybe what I need to do is go to the client side and be a marketing manager or a brand manager. And that led me on a path to go back to business school because all the Procter and Gamble brand managers all had their MBAs. So I said, well, maybe if I got my MBA, I would have those opportunities to eventually go client side. So I went back to get my MBA at Emory University, which was, I had a great 2 years doing that, and came out of school hoping to get that brand management job. And at the end, I came out of school in 2003, which was a horrible time to get out of graduate school. The dot-com bubble had burst. There were no jobs, no companies were strategically hiring. And so I had to get kind of creative with my job search, and I ended up going back into advertising after the MBA. So, so much for that plan of going client side after graduate school. So I went back to the advertising industry. I worked at a company called Havas, which again, another big global advertising agency. This time I was working on GlaxoSmithKline and Volvo and doing a lot of new business. And I think a lot of the training I had in my business school time had actually helped me a lot advance my career on the advertising agency side. And I was doing great. And, we were winning new business at the agency and we were doing award-winning creative work. And then my wife, she was pregnant with our first child. We were living in New York City again, in now a 700 square foot apartment, which is better than the 500 square foot apartment. So we were living in this apartment. We were pregnant with our first child, and we just had this freak out, like, we can't be in New York with a baby, it's impossible. And so I put some feelers out and ended up getting an offer in Atlanta, and I knew Atlanta well from business school with Emory, and said, well, and I did one of those cost of living adjustment calculators where you just say, all right, the cost to live in New York, the cost to live in Atlanta. And it was like mind blowing. It was like, for the salary I can get in Atlanta, it was almost like doubling your salary with what you get from a cost of living perspective. So we made the decision to leave New York and to, come back to Atlanta. And I started with a company called AutoTrader, and we've been here ever since, but I've had several different jobs since I got here. But the AutoTrader job, that was really my first client side gig. It was a great opportunity to be with a company. At the time when I joined AutoTrader, it was a $400 million company, and I was there for 5 years, and it grew to a $1 billion company. And so I came into AutoTrader as a marketing manager. I left as a director of marketing and jumped to what was my first VP of marketing role at a company called PGI. Had a good run at PGI. Then joined a startup called QA Symphony here in Atlanta, and that was my first CMO role. And I had a great 3-year run at QA Symphony, where the company grew from really a $1 million startup into a $20 million business, and raised about 50 million in the process from some very prestigious private equity firms. So I had a great run at QA Symphony. And then this ParkMobile opportunity came up, and that was kind of a very interesting one because I had been doing B2B for a while at AutoTrader and PGI and QA Symphony, and ParkMobile kind of gave me the opportunity to kind of get back to my roots of doing consumer marketing, and at the same time doing B2B marketing, because it's, we have two sides of the market. So I was intrigued with the opportunity. At the time, ParkMobile was not very well known. Even though a lot of people had the app on their phone, nobody actually knew they had the app. And so I saw it as an opportunity for me to get in with a brand that, already had some good traction, but just really needed some help turning up the dial on the marketing side. So I've been here now for 3 years. It's been a fantastic run. I've expanded also my responsibility. So now I run marketing and product, which is pretty interesting, but it's a really fun job at a really interesting company that is doing a lot of innovative things in the parking and mobility space. So that's kind of a very long-winded origin story, and I apologize, but it's like I said, it wasn't a very clear linear journey. It was a lot of bouncing around to get to where I eventually wound up.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think that gives a lot of context really behind why you've been able to kind of navigate nicely between B2C and B2B. And Park Mobile is a B2B to C, right? So you are B2C in that people need the mobile app, consumers, those of us who have, obviously a car and need to park anywhere in the cities that you guys provide the Park Mobile, parking spaces, right? But it's B2B because your clients are municipalities, right? They're airports, they're venues like stadiums around the country. So I would imagine that all that business acumen that you were able to absorb and get with the Sachis of the world and the agencies, and then Auto Trader on a B2B shaped also your leadership style, what to do and what not to do around marketing campaigns and how those interact with product marketing as well as probably with sales, right? So yeah, you definitely took a different journey, but I would imagine that for those that are aspiring to be a CMO, I would dare to say that the days of linear, like going into an organization and expecting just to work up the ladder to get from a director to a VP to a marketing is very blurred these days, because there's a lot of talent out there. There's also a lot of organizations that are being more flexible about it, not just being an in-house career trajectory, and are maybe open to someone who comes with a diverse background. Going back to sort of the origin of this podcast, right? I think that diversity of your knowledge gained throughout your experience has equipped you to become a CMO that can do the kind of the B2B and B2C sort of seamlessly, right? Because you've actually been exposed to both sides. So awesome for that for you and your organization. What are you seeing now that you mentioned product marketing? Because a lot of these SaaS companies that I work with and that I follow, there always seems to be that challenge of where does product marketing kind of belong or own? Is it owned by the development team or the technology team side, programmers, developers, right? And or marketing? What's your sort of take on that, and how have you been able to marry that into your role as CMO? That might be an interesting one for folks that are in that predicament right now.
Yeah, and it's definitely a tricky one, and it's another one of there are a lot of kind of weird overlaps that are happening in the last couple of years. Marketing responsibility bleeding into product, sales responsibility bleeding into marketing. And there's no right answer to it, honestly. And it's a lot of just feel. Do you have the right person? Does that person, do they belong more in the marketing team or the product team? Are they able to kind of seamlessly work across both teams? And so I don't want to say there's one solution, but generally, if you have a person who is responsible for things like defining the value proposition, producing collateral, producing sales assets related to the product, kind of translating engineering speak into speak that a consumer or a customer can understand. I find that role should usually live within the marketing team, but they have to have high competency in the product arena. So I'll give you an example. I think oftentimes the best product marketers are actually former sales engineers. So the guys who are kind of in the weeds doing the demos every day, because they have to figure out the story of what they're telling. They're getting tons of questions, and they also have to kind of constantly course correct their story based on what the questions are, based on what the client or prospect needs are. So I think one of my most successful product marketing hires was someone that I plucked out of the sales engineering role because he got it. He understood the product at a very deep level. He was very technical, but he also had the kind of the sales wiring and the messaging sense that he could translate what he was saying into a customer and then put that into collateral, put that into a product plan, and understand how do I get product and engineering the inputs they need on what customers want. And so that's where I've seen product marketing be most successful, is when you have that person who isn't necessarily a pedigreed product marketer, and understands the pragmatic approach and all of those things and all the frameworks. But it's someone who is more in the weeds of understanding the client needs and how the product fits those client needs, and then can take that a level up and is saying, all right, how do I take this stuff that I do on demos and translate that into assets and website content that scales, right? I mean, that's really the job of the product marketer. You think of it, it's almost like it's a sales engineer for scale in some ways. It's explaining value prop, it's explaining features and benefits, but doing it in a way that scales. So it's not just on an individual phone call, it's on the web. So a client who just is kicking the tires could come in and see it. It's in a collateral sheet that the sales guys could take out, and serves as a crutch for them as they're explaining maybe something technical to their client without a sales engineer with them. So that's the way I think about product marketing. But I think, the biggest thing I've learned working at a lot of different technology companies is that there's no optimal org strategy or structure. You kind of have to figure out what you need as a business, and then find the right people who could fill those gaps. I've had product marketers who were very involved in the strategy of the product and the roadmap. And I've had product marketers who don't do any of that, but just are involved in value prop definition, collateral for the sales team, website content, demo videos. It just depends on the resources, the talent you have on staff, what you need, what your problems are as a business. So it's probably not the best answer to your question, but I think the thing I've learned through 20 plus year career is that every time you step into a new role in a new company, you bring a lot of things you've learned, but they don't all apply and translate. And you have to be highly flexible and take the stuff that works and implement it, and leave the stuff that doesn't work behind. And so that's always been my approach when I come into a new organization. ParkMobile, we don't have product marketing at ParkMobile. My last company, we did have product marketing. A lot of the product marketing at ParkMobile is done out of our B2B marketing team. So they're technically product marketing, but they're more in a sales enablement role. So it's whatever fits the company you're in. And the thing I've noticed though is that if you don't have product marketing, you definitely know it because you're flailing. So if you don't have it, that's when you have to fill it. But sometimes you have enough people that are knowledgeable enough, good enough at being product marketers, even though they're not in that formal product marketing role, that you can get by with, or they're doing the job even though they don't have that product marketing title.
Yeah, no, interesting that you are plucking SEs to become potentially really good at product marketing, because you're right, they're so close to the product themselves on a technical perspective. But if they can have a little bit of sales mindset, they'll understand what the buyer needs, and therefore could really be a powerful product marketer. So no, that's great. Now I know that like right around the end of 2020, you put out a nice, interesting LinkedIn post around your 2021 predictions. And many of us have gone through those and seen posts like that. But I was a bit curious because I saw that on yours, you put, hey, there might be be careful if you're a marketing leader, because there could be programs, campaigns, budgets that if they didn't work in 2020, will be cut and maybe cut forever. But you also posted there, if I recall correctly, that also be mindful that there are opportunities to reallocate like sort of budgets and invest in more MarTech, and that might take from, let's say, advertising, but you might be able to give your company, your team back some resources through MarTech. So I'm curious, you are a software company, you are in a space where it's B2B and B2C. What are some of those MarTech investments that you think are right now, as a CMO, trying to obviously add value with your team and revenue to the bottom line, that are sort of foremost, or that you think could help a B2B with a C kind of company like yourself?
Yeah. Well, the one thing COVID forced us to do was to really take a magnifying glass to every single thing we were doing in marketing. I mean, we had to make big cuts to marketing, and that was across the board. I think every marketer I talked to, no one came away from 2020 without making some pretty big cuts. But when you take that magnifying glass to your marketing program, it really does open your eyes and make you question a lot of your assumptions. I've always been one that's felt, you do have to be always on, right? Or in the past, there's always consumers out there. They're always on digital. So it makes sense to be always on, to always have some level of search engine spending, some social spending. And we really questioned that assumption in 2020. And we found that, well, one, does that even make sense if no one's going out and paying for parking? Do you need to have any spend in the market? And I would say, the answer is probably no. I hear people talk about, what companies really need to do during a downturn is invest in marketing. I mean, that's just BS, right? That you're not living in reality if that's what you think, because no CEO and no board is going to let you do that unless you're in one of these segments that happen to be a growth segment during COVID, like Zoom or Slack or something like that. Everyone else got crushed. And so you can't pretend that you could keep spending what you were spending pre-COVID, and just because we have to, or because the competitor is still spending, well, I have to keep spending. So it made us really question all of our assumptions. And what we realized was, well, maybe we don't need to spend what we're spending. And I believe that even as we go back into 2021 and we see revenues come back and budgets come back, I don't know if I'm going to put money back into the same programs that I did, especially the ones where I look at and I can't go to my CEO and CFO and board and say with a straight face, I 100% know that this is making an impact on the business, right? And I didn't say just generating an ROI, and making an impact on the business, right? And so we looked at everything and we said, what's the most important thing now for our company and for our business? Well, the most important thing is that, at least with the audience we have, we figure out ways to keep them engaged with ParkMobile. And so we looked at our tool set. And so we put a premium now, a much bigger premium on user engagement of our existing base of users than we did in the past, where it was all about how many customers are we acquiring today? What's our how many customers did we acquire yesterday? Are we up or are we down? It was all about acquisition. And what we didn't realize, there was a bit of a leaky bucket where we are acquiring all these customers, but then we weren't retaining them as effectively as we could. So we already had an engagement tool in place. We use a tool called Braze, but that tool has really been invaluable for us because it's really let us segment our user base really effectively and market to them to keep them engaged over time. So even when they're not using the app, we could still do some marketing campaigns to them. And we did, I think, some pretty clever campaigns where we actually turned the app into a fundraising tool so they could support COVID charities right in the ParkMobile app. So it gave us a reason to engage with our existing user base and gave them an easy way to make a donation to an important charity. And we've raised tens of thousands of dollars over that time just by tapping into our user base. In fact, every year, every marketer and every company does these like end of year emails, right? Sometimes they're a recap, or it's just a happy holidays message, happy New Year message. Our email this year said, it was really clear. It said, don't delete the ParkMobile app. And it said, because you will be missing out on an opportunity to raise money for an important charity. Go to the ParkMobile app, donate, and we'll match a portion of the proceeds. And so we took that kind of holiday email and kind of turned it on its head, and took something that you would never really say to someone, telling them not to delete the app, but we're giving them a second, just like, one, reminding them they still have the app, two, showing them how they can use the app to do some good. And so we use these MarTech engagement tools now to really strengthen our user base, to engage our user base. And we did some other things. If you don't have all this budget going into the search engines or social campaigns, we said, all right, what else can we do? And we started looking at breakage points where we were losing our users. And this stuff maybe we didn't study enough in the past, but we found there was a real breakage on people who were their credit card was about to expire, or it had expired, and then they couldn't use the app. They got locked out of the app because they had an expired credit card. And so that causes a lot of angst in the app stores and in negative Twitter reviews. And so we said, all right, what can we do with those people? So we started just generating new campaigns to remind them that their card was about to expire, right? And we got tons of people to update their credit card. So before they had the problem where the card had already expired and we had to lock them out, now they actually are able to go update their credit card and we don't have that problem. So those are the kind of things we did. We just doubled down on retention user engagement with our MarTech stack. And because we didn't have the other stuff going that was distracting us. And we realized, gosh, there's the gold mine right here in our user base. And I think when we go back to some normalcy, that's going to serve us really well. And we may spend less on other programs and just keep spending more time focusing on really getting our users to keep using the app and to use it more often.
Yeah, no, I recall early on when pandemic hit back in 2020 that you had a lot of really interesting engagement around fundraising because there was the obvious need, right? And you guys are in cities across America, so there was a way to help with food banks and other things. And I think that was a great way to showcase the brand and humanize the brand, as well as to engage your users, right? To your point. But so if you were to put your B2B hat on now, what did you guys do for the B2B side? So for your B2B team who's got to look for the next, airport venue or the next city that wants to get a multi-year contract to have you guys be kind of the parking tech of choice for that city, that municipality. What could you say about that? Because that's the B2B space that is very difficult and had a lot of challenges, unless you were, like you said, on like a telemedicine company that got an acceleration because of COVID,
Right.
or the kind of the Zooms of the world and that sort of thing. What did you guys do for B2B, and what do you have planned for 2021 as things start getting back to some normalcy, like you said?
Yeah, we did a few things, and B2B in 2020 actually turned out to be an enormous strength for our company, and we had a record sales year, amazingly, from a just new client acquisition perspective. And so we did a couple things when things started to shut down. I mean, the parking industry was in free fall, and it was a scary time. So ParkMobile, one of the things that we really have, we have great data. We know where people are parking, when they're parking. And so we started actively sharing our data with the industry, really to become not just a vendor, but a thought leader on what's going on during COVID. And we put out multiple reports on just, tracking the declines in transaction volume because of COVID. And then when they started coming back, tracking the increase, and we were segmenting by cities or universities or beaches. And the industry really responded well to that, just to being a partner to the industry, to showing them, hey, here's what's going on, because they can't see it. All they can see is their city or their operation. So by sharing this national view of what was happening as a result of COVID was really helping our clients. The second thing we did is we started sharing best practices. So as we looked at cities across the country, some were doing free parking, some were doing free parking for hospital workers, or some were saying, hey, we're going to take this parking garage and we're going to convert it into a hospital facility for overflow. And we were seeing all of these best practices all over the country, but no one was bringing it all together. But because we kind of work with so many different cities and operators, we were able to help share those best practices across the country. And so the industry really appreciated that sharing of best practices, so they could see, okay, oh, well, they're doing something really innovative there in Hoboken, New Jersey. We're sitting here in Dallas, Texas. Let's call them, because ParkMobile is showing that they're doing something really cool. So again, connecting different parking operators and it was a really important thing during this time, and sharing those best practices. And the third thing we did to the industry, which I think really made the biggest impact, is we shifted our messaging really quickly. So we had always talked about this concept of smart parking and smart mobility, and you need ParkMobile because we help your city enable smart mobility. And that's very aspirational. But at the end of the day, when COVID hit, there was a urgent need for many cities, and it was around contactless payments, making contactless payments because people could transmit germs on the physical parking hardware. One, people didn't want attendants taking cash. You didn't want people out there collecting coins out of meters because it all could cause the spread of the virus, right? So what the industry wanted to do was, as quickly as possible, go contactless. And so we shifted all of our messaging that was around smart mobility. We just talked about contactless parking payments, contactless payments. And what we saw as we started promoting this to all of our clients, especially, or all of our prospects, especially the ones that didn't have a solution in place, they said, we need that now. How quickly can you implement? And we even had, we launched in the city of Belmar, New Jersey, which is a beach town on the Jersey Shore. They made the decision when we launched, they usually had hardware out there, and they were going to add ParkMobile. They said, get rid of the hardware. We don't want it out there. We only want mobile pay. And you're seeing more and more of these locations going mobile only, or at least what they call asset light, where they're taking some of that equipment off the street. And so what we saw is this real acceleration towards contactless and away from the physical hardware that used to be out there. And we kind of rode that wave. We also did things like, we had one of our competitors, unfortunately, went out of business. We did a guarantee to all of their clients. We said, hey, we will get you up and running with contactless payments in 5 days, 5 business days from a signed contract. And so we got almost 100% of their clients, because they had a mobile payment. Suddenly their mobile provider goes out of business and they're left with no options. So we were able to transition all of those clients over to ParkMobile pretty quickly. So I would say, this year from a B2B standpoint, sometimes B2B, while the B2C business was not good, the B2B business this year was very good. And we just kind of kept pouring gas on the fire and kept doing more campaigns, more programs. We had a webinar series. We were doing webinars with, sharing data, and it just, everything we were doing really positioned us very well as the leader in contactless parking payments. And that just led to a ton of opportunity that came inbound to us and to our sales team that we were able to close. So it was a very, very exciting year from a B2B standpoint. And that sets us up really well when people are vaccinated and things are getting back to normal, because we see a real hockey stick coming for our B2C business in the very near future, because we have so many more new clients now than we had before COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love the fact that you guys doubled down on thought leadership content. And when you were talking about getting all the data that you guys have and sharing it across the industry with the parking operators and the industry at large, it sort of reminded me of what Johns Hopkins University did around C19 and all the stats, right? So everyone knew that CNN or any kind of media outlet would have a Johns Hopkins report as kind of a true north of what's happening in the trends. So that was very, very savvy and smart. And I think it comes from your time also working on the consumer side of things, of knowing that, you've got to kind of hit while the iron's hot. The contactless messaging as well. That's very product marketing driven, but it's very, very much driven also by what the need was, right? In terms of the consumer's needs. But from the B2B perspective, they want to make sure that they are adhering to like the C19 guidelines at the time. And now we're moving into 2021, where we'll see how that gets maybe relaxed a little bit or changed or morphs into what it morphs into. But very interesting that you were able to take this sort of kind of content approach, thought leadership approach to differentiate yourself from the competitors and help your B2B sales team have wins and accelerate wins, really because of the sort of the messaging and making sure that it fits with what was happening in the current state. So really, really interesting. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm going to presume that because content and thought leadership drive engagement to your website, that you guys probably saw a nice tick on website traffic without having, to your point, spending money that was usually, put in a bucket for, paid media or, advertising and what have you, right? Social media advertising. Is that true, or am I presuming?
Oh yeah, especially on the B2B content on our website was really, we had really high engagement on that. And we did a webinar series about issues related to COVID, and we were getting, when we started doing the webinar series, you get 10 to 20 people. By the end, we were up to several hundred people showing up for our webinar series. And then once you get that engine going, it just feeds, and then all of a sudden, all of the main industry groups started coming to us, wanting to partner with us and bring us onto their webinars and write for their publications. So we really, I think, the more quality content you can create, it's just going to help you long term, position your business not just as a vendor in the industry, but actually as a thought leader and as someone who's providing meaningful, helpful content to your customers.
Sorry about that. I was just telling you that I'm jotting down some of this because I really think that it's very applicable to other B2Bs that found themselves in a situation where they had to do these little micro pivots. Like obviously ParkMobile didn't do a full pivot into reinventing themselves into something else that they're not, right? That you guys are not, but you were able to do through content, thought leadership, webinars, the being sort of the source of trends and knowledge around everything that was happening with C19 that could impact, the parking industry at large. And we're able to capture a lot of demand through like inbound, basically, right? Is what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are you seeing now for 2021? Now that you've built, we've all had this 2020 of kind of shared experience and the cocoon year, as Christopher Lockhead likes to call it. We're trying to get out of this cocoon year and into 2021 and maybe into mid-year of 2021. What are you seeing that you're going to add to your demand engine, since you were able to get some nice lift on B2B and also had some good B2C wins for retention? What are you seeing that you might add to that mix?
Yeah. So one of the things that COVID really showed us was that, we knew that there's a huge demand for contactless payments, but at the same time, there's not the desire by every consumer to have a full-featured app, right? And so the traditional mindset from someone who is a parking provider would be, well, I have hardware and then I have an app. And that's good enough, right? One type of hardware and one mobile app. And so with COVID, what we discovered is that one app actually is not enough, because if you really want to go contactless, it's important that you're giving consumers choice. Because if you go to a city and the city doesn't accept ParkMobile and you have ParkMobile on your phone, but this city accepts another app, it's going to be annoying because maybe you don't go to that city that often. You don't want to have to download and set up a new app. Maybe you just don't want a full-featured app. So what we're driving towards now in 2021 is really a product that gives consumers a lot more choice in the way that they can pay for parking. And this is really good for the industry because our B2B clients, they want to give consumers choice in how they pay. Do you want to pay on the ParkMobile app? Do you want to pay on the hardware? Do you want to pay by text? Do you want to pay with Google Pay? And so that's really a big driver for us this year, is where we're not forcing everyone who wants to make a parking payment into a full-featured download, set up an account app. Later this month, we're actually rolling out a web-based version of ParkMobile. So a lightweight web app that you can scan a QR code at the meter or text a number. It'll send you back a link and you can get right into the checkout flow. And you'll be able to either create a web account or you can create just a guest checkout. You can check out as a guest. And so again, now you have the full featured app, you have a web app, and the web app is accessible through text or QR code. And the third thing we just launched recently is a partnership with Google Pay. So now right in the new Google Pay app, you could make a parking payment using ParkMobile inside Google Pay. So it's essentially a micro app inside another app. So maybe you don't want to have a full ParkMobile account, but you already have Google Pay on your phone. Now you can make a payment with ParkMobile right in Google Pay. So for us, it's becoming less important to get everyone into the full featured app experience, even though we think that's the best experience with the most functionality, but it's not going to be right for every single person in every single case. So we're giving people a lot more choice. And what this is going to do, one, it's going to be great from a consumer perspective because consumers will be able to pay the way that they want to pay, whether it's app, web, Google Pay. But at the same time, it gives cities the ability to get rid of some of this hardware that's on the street, right? Because if you're giving your constituents all kinds of choice with the way they can make contactless payments, you're going to invest less in the hardware, the expensive hardware that you have to constantly replace, and you're not going to have to make those capital expenses. So we see a world in the near distant future where in any city you go to, there's going to be no meters. There's going to be no pay stations. Everything is going to be pay contactless. And here are the ways you could pay via app, web, or maybe a lot of different options. So that's where our focus is from a marketing and product. It's all about driving this idea of choice, more choices, more options. And the most important thing to us, though, is that you are making a parking payment, right? You're making you're doing it, and you're doing it contactlessly. So that's really exciting to us, and we're thrilled with kind of the evolution of our product from the app to all these other areas.
Yeah, you know what just rung to me when you said this, the future state of a cities maybe being parking meterless, or not having the kludgy sort of relationship we have right now with parking operators, in terms of there's always something you've got to go to a big machine to touch, right? So made me think of, you guys seem to be going on a path of category design in a certain way, because you're creating a category that may not be as prominent or even exists. This whole contactless parking payment, kind of virtual, I want to say virtual world, but you're obviously giving them choice, the choice of being able to do it through the mobile app, through Google Pay's app as well. So that's interesting, because I think that for most of us, when we just travel from state to state, we all are very accustomed to, or have been to, oh yes, look for the parking, the parking lots, the public parking lots are usually some big signage, and then that you've got to have some kind of engagement with some kind of machine, right? So very interesting. Have you guys given it some thought like that, like where you're with your C-levels, your peers, thinking category design in terms of, we're coming into this into a market we're already are part of and are a player in, but we're also kind of redefining or reshaping what that experience should be moving forward for those that want to just have a contactless experience. Is that fair?
It's really a core part of our strategy. So the way we attack the market is we try to get plant a flag somewhere in an area. And so the example I'll give you is Atlanta is a good example, the city where our headquarters is. So we are the parking app for the city of Atlanta. Okay. So once we started rolling out in the city of Atlanta for all the on-street parking, then you start to go to all the lots, and the lots are controlled by private operators generally. So you start to go do deals with all of the private lot operators and say, hey, they're paying for ParkMobile on the street. Why don't you accept ParkMobile in your lot? Easy. You'll get more people in your lot because they know they can use ParkMobile, and the guy down the street doesn't. So now you're in the street, you're in a lot of the off-street lots. Then we started going to a shop. We went to this big shopping area here called Pond City Market. And we said, hey, you have this huge parking lot and you charge for parking, and you have these you have 5 pay stations, right? So every weekend when you go, there's a line at the pay stations. Why don't you accept ParkMobile? So now they accept ParkMobile. Then we went to State Farm Arena and Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We said, hey, ParkMobile is used all over Atlanta. Why don't you do reservations at your sporting events, at your stadiums or your concerts, and accept ParkMobile reservations? So now ParkMobile is available in those venues. Then we went to Georgia Tech, and we said, hey, Georgia Tech, why don't you take ParkMobile? It's used all over Atlanta. It's used at the stadium. So then Georgia Tech signs on. Then we start to go outside of Atlanta. We went to the city of Decatur, which is a suburb. We went up to Roswell. We said, hey, everyone in Atlanta uses it. All the commuters are using it. You need it in your city. So now it's in those cities. Then we went as far as Athens, Georgia, right, where the University of Georgia is. We said, hey, everyone from Atlanta goes to Athens. Everyone in Atlanta has ParkMobile. You need it. And pretty soon we're doing a deal with the airport in Atlanta where you'll be able to reserve your parking at the airport with ParkMobile. So you see how it works. It's as you land one part of a location, you start to expand into other areas. You start to see these opportunities in the city and then expanding out from the city. Washington, D.C. is another great example where we do all the parking, on-street parking in Washington, D.C. So then we started going to all the suburbs, Alexandria, Fairfax, Arlington, Montgomery County. Now we do all of those areas too, because everyone who goes into Washington, D.C. usually lives in those outer areas. And so that's really the way we're doing it. I mean, our goal is to make the ParkMobile app available in as many places as possible, both where you live and then where you travel to. And that's why today, when you look at our footprint, we're in 450 cities. We're really everywhere across the country. And we're growing that base of locations on a monthly basis, really exponentially. And so kind of what you had laid out before, that's exactly what we're trying to do, is that wherever you go, and anywhere you want to park in any way you want to park, ParkMobile has you covered.
Yeah, that's amazing that you guys already have a very thought out land and expand strategy, right? The fact that you're doing it on B2B, but also have some B2C kind of engagements on how to have the retention and have your own sort of stickiness, your own sort of land and expand on the B2C side is pretty incredible, because it's almost like you got to have almost two teams really. And when I think about it, it sounds to me those that are on the B2B side of your business, and then the B2C, right? The user experience, making it accessible in all sorts of ways, from a very lightweight web portal to the app itself, to piggybacking off of a Google Pay, the 8,000-pound gorilla on mobile app, right? And adoption. So no, this is all really, really interesting. And I love that you're kind of laying out sort of the strategies of what we've done, because I think that a lot of companies that are out there can learn how to replicate some of that to their own businesses, right? So this is great stuff, Jeff. I really appreciate it. I try to have a little fun towards the end of the episode, and what I do is it's a little bit of like a quick fire questions type of thing, which is, I really firmly believe that readers are leaders. And so what are some, books that have impacted you, or that you would recommend for folks out there that want to achieve a CMO level of success that you've had in the last, decade or so? What are some books you would recommend?
I mean, I've read a lot of the core business books. They're all great. You should read them. Good to Great, Built to Last, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. I mean, those are all, really good books. I tend to get more of my inspiration from books that aren't necessarily business books, interestingly. I'll tell you one book I just read that was super inspiring was called It's Can't Hurt Me. It's a story of a Navy SEAL named David Goggins, and kind of his journey from growing up in poverty to becoming a Navy SEAL and an ultra runner, and just really inspiring. And I, a lot of times I take a lot more from those books, learning about, those kind of people, than I do from just the standard business books. But yeah, so I would definitely check out Can't Hurt Me. Really, really excellent read.
No, that's great. And speaking of books, a question that I definitely had, which is your own journey writing a book and being a first-time author. If you could describe a little bit of what that's been like, and also, I love the title, so I won't give it away, so I'll let you say it. But how has that journey been, and did you come up a bit with that title?
Yeah, so the book is called How Not to Suck at Marketing, and it's meant to be a career survival guide for people who are pursuing, marketing careers, and want to get to the CMO level. It's it's a combination of I was writing a blog for a long time, and it's a lot of things that I wrote, on the blog, and then I started just taking them and putting them together, and it kind of was all fitting together in an interesting narrative about what it takes for modern marketers to really be successful. And I was at a conference. I was speaking at a conference several years ago. It was one of those digital summit conferences. And I was trying to come up with a name for my presentation. And this specific presentation was about when I was at PGI, and we had just a completely broken marketing machine. And I had to come in and really try to fix it. And it was really hard. One of the hardest things I've done in my career. And I learned a ton of lessons from it. And I ended up being, having pretty good success in, revamping the entire marketing program, everything from the brand to demand gen to they gave me an inside sales team. So it was a real success story. And I was looking at the slides, and I was trying to think about, how I felt. And it was like, I came up with this title, How Not to Suck at Marketing, because my view was like, when I started there, 6 months in, everyone would look at me and be like, Jeff sucks at marketing because our marketing is terrible. And then, a few years later, our marketing was very good. And so the title was How Not to Suck at Marketing. And, these conferences, there's like 3 different sessions going on at once. And I didn't know if that title would resonate with people, but I swear it was standing room only.
Room only, I bet.
Like people like lined up on the walls, sitting on the floor. It's not because anyone knew who I was. Just I think that title really resonated with people. And I came out, and I think I opened it. I said, "Wow, this is welcome to the support group for marketers who suck." And everyone,
it got a good laugh. Hi, my name is Jeff Perkins.
I suck at marketing. But it really shows you, that showed me anyway, how hard it is what we try to do as marketers, especially when we're coming in either to build a program or to try to fix a broken program. I mean, it's super hard. And if you don't have the right mindset and the right team and the right executives who are willing to give you the chance, you're probably not going to be very successful. And so for me, I learned a ton of lessons in really how to rebuild a program. And, that's really what the book is about. It's what do you do when you're at the bottom, or you're at the beginning and you're trying to do something and build something, and how do you get it right?
Yeah, well, I love that, and we'll definitely put it in the show notes, and so folks can obviously get to it and find it, buy it, read it, and use all that. I'm sure the knowledge and insights there for how to get to the CMO level and not suck at marketing. So I appreciate that.
And
Now,
I'll say it's a very easy URL to remember. It's hownottosuckatmarketing.com.
hey, that's brilliant that you got that URL too, right there. That shows a bit of your marketing and copywriting chops that I'm sure you got from your days working at agency side, right? But no, this is awesome. So a couple more questions. One is I always like to take my guests on a journey to Back to the Future, one of my favorite all-time movies and franchises. If you were able to jump into the DeLorean with Doc and Marty and go back to speak to a younger Jeff Perkins, around through your career journey or even life journey, would there be something you would do different or double down on, something that you have felt that you might have figured out, so you would have rather figured out sooner than later?
I've always been very much a generalist in my career journey. I think the advice I would have given to my younger self would be to try to go deeper on something. I think I've realized later in life that one of the talents I have that maybe I didn't nurture early enough was the ability to write effectively. And I wonder if I had nurtured that a little bit earlier on, would I be in a different place today? So that's the one thing I would probably say is figure out what your strengths are, as early on as you can, and then really try to nurture those strengths and try to focus on really building a strength in a specialized way early in your career that will serve you very well as you kind of move up.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, definitely double down on your strengths early on. And the last question really is more about: is there anything that that I haven't asked that's on your mind that you would like to share, or that you thought would be worth noting?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this, and, because we're talking about marketing. My philosophy about marketing, and I think why I've been able to move from different types of companies and industries and B2B and B2C, agency side and client side, has been less about maybe like, me being smart or me, having like really like a lot of talent. It's more about kind of, I think, my mindset in my approach to any job, where I don't approach things as necessarily a marketer or with a marketing mindset. Um, I approach everything as a problem that needs to be solved. And I think the best marketers generally do that. Um, and if you could start to think of your job as a marketer, not as someone who's does advertising or collateral or campaigns, but as someone who's in the company to really solve problems. And that kind of changes what you can do. And so when people come to you and they say, hey, Jeff, here's the problem. We need a print ad, or we need an email campaign. I might look at that problem and say, actually, we don't need an email campaign. We need to go talk to the sales guys and retrain them. Or we don't need an email campaign. We need a new product feature. And so when you're able to think like that in a problem solving mode and getting out of the marketing box, it really opens up things for you. And that's why at previous jobs, I was running marketing, but I was given a sales team, right? I was in my current job, I'm running marketing, but I'm given the product team as well, because executives at the company and the board know that I'm not just a marketer. I'm a problem solver at my core, and I have a lot of stretch. And so for people that want to move up the executive ranks, the advice I have is, don't just be content to be specialized in one role. If you want to move up, you're going to have to build a portfolio and constantly expand that portfolio. And the only way you'll be able to do that is to approach things not as a marketing or advertising person, but approach things as really a business owner. And as a business owner, you want to think about, how do you solve that problem in the most effective way possible?
Well, I love it. It's like, amen, hallelujah, about not being in that marketing box and being more on the problem solver, critical thinking type of mindset, and for your other, colleagues to see you and your department as such. I love that. I think that's a really good mindset and a good philosophy and good advice for those who want to up their ranks through their journey in their marketing careers. So I really want to thank you for being a guest on Smart Chickens. This episode is really, I think, dedicated to that journey and what you've done in your career. So thank you so much for your time. Also, for people that want to get a hold of you or to learn more about your book and or what you're doing with ParkMobile, how can they reach you, Jeff?
They could just hit me up on LinkedIn. It's linkedin.com/in/Jeff Perkins 1. They could hit me up on Twitter at Jeff Perkins 8. Or they could, there's a submit form on hownottosuckatmarketing.com, and they could submit their name through there. So anyway, probably LinkedIn's the best way to connect with me, though. But love to continue the conversation after this pod is over.